The late afternoon sun draped the city in hues of fading gold. The streets were nearly empty, save for a faint hum of traffic blocks away, and the occasional bark of a stray dog echoing between brick walls lined with graffiti. The air was heavy with that peculiar stillness that often comes right before nightfall, when shadows stretch long and silence presses in. It was in this silence that Mrs. Eleanor Hayes moved slowly down the cracked pavement. Her gait was careful but firm, each step a testament to 81 years of perseverance. In her hands, she carried 2 shopping bags filled with canned goods and bread, the sort of simple groceries that kept her nourished in her modest apartment. Her back was slightly bent, and her silver hair caught the glow of the sun, turning her into a glowing silhouette against the dimming sky. Across the street, a group of teenagers lounged carelessly against a wall scrawled with graffiti. Their voices were loud, their laughter sharp and mocking. They were full of the restless energy of youth, the kind that searches for amusement in all the wrong places. To them, Eleanor was not a woman with a story, with decades of love and loss carved into her soul. To them, she was just an old lady, struggling with bags, an easy target. One boy nudged another with his elbow, smirking. "Easy pickings," he whispered, loud enough for Eleanor to hear. And before she could react, they moved. One boy shoved her shoulder roughly. The bags tumbled from her hands, cans clattering and rolling across the gutter, bread landing in a puddle. Eleanor staggered back, her frail frame almost collapsing, but her hand shot out against the wall. Her body shook with the impact, her knees threatening to buckle, but she refused to fall. The boys erupted into laughter. Their voices echoed cruelly, bouncing off the brick walls around them. It was the laughter of predators circling prey, convinced of their power. But Eleanor, breathing hard, slowly bent down to gather her scattered groceries. Her hands trembled with age, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady, clear, and hauntingly calm. "You think you're strong," she said softly, her eyes lifting to meet theirs, "because you made an old woman stumble?" The laughter stuttered for the briefest moment. The ringleader, tall and sharp-eyed, barked out a dismissive laugh, masking the unease that prickled inside him. "Don't preach, Grandma. You're lucky we didn't take your purse." Her gaze pierced through him. It wasn't the gaze of a victim. It wasn't the look of someone cowering in fear. It was the gaze of someone who had lived through war, through loss, through pain they couldn't imagine. It was the gaze of someone who had raised children, buried friends, and endured. "You don't know what strength is," Eleanor whispered, almost to herself, "but life will teach you." The boys shuffled uncomfortably. For reasons none of them could name, the thrill of the moment drained away. The fun was gone. They muttered insults under their breath and turned to leave. Yet the ringleader, against his will, glanced back once more. Her words, soft as they were, had stuck to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. That should have been the end. But fate has a way of weaving threads tighter than we expect. Later that evening, as darkness fell, storm clouds rolled in. Rain lashed against rooftops, thunder rumbled like cannon fire, and the city streets turned into rivers of water. The air grew violent, whipping umbrellas from hands and snapping branches from trees. The same group of boys found themselves huddled in a bus stop, trying to laugh off the growing fear. The night was darker than they had expected, the storm heavier. Their laughter, however, was soon drowned by something else, a cry of pain. The youngest of the group, barely 16, doubled over suddenly, clutching his chest. His face turned pale, his breath sharp and shallow. Panic tore through the group like lightning. Hey, what's wrong with him?" one boy stammered. I don't know," another shouted, voice rising with fear. The ringleader's hands trembled as he tried to shake the younger boy. "Breathe, man. Come on, breathe." But he didn't know what to do. None of them did. And then, through the rain, came the steady, rhythmic tap of a cane. They turned, wide-eyed. Out of the storm emerged Eleanor Hayes. Her coat was soaked through, her umbrella barely holding against the wind. Yet she moved with a kind of unshakable purpose. She saw them. She saw the boy collapsing. And she didn't hesitate. "Move aside," she commanded, her voice cutting through the storm like a blade. For reasons they didn't fully understand, they obeyed instantly. Eleanor knelt beside the boy, her frail hands suddenly steady, practiced, certain. What the boys didn't know was that she had once been a nurse during wartime. She had tended to soldiers bleeding out on muddy fields, patched wounds under bombardment, and steadied hands trembling from shock. To her, this boy was not a stranger. He was someone's child, someone worth saving. Her fingers gently loosened his collar, adjusting his posture, checking his breathing with the precision of memory. "You're safe," she whispered to him, her voice soft yet commanding. "You're safe. Breathe with me. In, out, in, out." The boy's ragged breath slowly steadied. Color returned faintly to his cheeks. The storm still roared, but inside that bus stop, a different silence fell, one of awe. The ringleader stood frozen. He had been the one who shoved her. He had been the one who laughed. Now he watched as the very woman he had mocked was saving his friend's life. His chest ached, not from the storm, but from shame. Eleanor looked up at him. Rain dripped from her silver hair, her lashes wet. Her voice was low, but it struck him like thunder. "Strength is not in shoving the weak. Strength is in lifting others when they fall." Her words branded themselves into his mind. He would never forget them. When the ambulance finally arrived, it was Eleanor who spoke to the medics clearly and calmly, explaining what had happened, her voice unwavering despite the storm and her soaked clothes. The boy was lifted into the vehicle. Just before the doors shut, he turned his head weakly toward her. "Thank you," he whispered. The ringleader tried to speak, his throat tightening with words he didn't know how to say. But Eleanor only touched his arm gently and said, "Remember this night. Remember it well." And then she disappeared into the storm, cane tapping, umbrella fighting the wind, until she was gone. From that night on, everything changed. The boys no longer laughed cruelly at strangers on the street. They no longer sought amusement in weakness. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they changed course. Especially the ringleader. He carried that night like a scar etched deep into his soul. He carried the shame of shoving an old woman. But he also carried the grace of her saving his friend without hesitation. That dual weight guided his choices, shaped his character. Years passed. He grew older. He became a teacher, standing in classrooms filled with restless boys who reminded him of himself. When he spoke of kindness, of compassion, of true strength, his students leaned in, sensing the conviction in his voice. He never told them the full story, at least, not until one day, when a student asked him where he had learned about strength. He smiled sadly, his voice trembling with memory. "From a woman," he said, "who had every reason to hate me, but chose instead to save me." Eleanor Hayes passed away quietly in her sleep years later. No headlines, no grand monuments. Just a quiet funeral attended by neighbors, a few relatives, and, unnoticed by many, the same boys she once scolded in the street, now grown men, standing silently at the back with heads bowed. Her legacy did not live in books or statues. It lived in them. In the way they treated others. In the way they raised their children. In the way they learned to see strength not as cruelty, but as compassion. And maybe that's the lesson for us all. That real strength is never in the shove. It's in the hand we extend to lift someone up. Before I end this story, let me pause once more. If Eleanor's courage and compassion touched your heart, if you felt the storm, the fear, and the quiet power of her strength, then I invite you to be part of this journey. Like this video, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe to Soul Touch Stories. Because stories like this deserve to live on. Years later, when the ringleader-turned-teacher looked into the faces of his students,